Hi guys, it's Mr.Y. Today we're going to be talking about life's interactions and the categories that most of life's interactions fall under in terms of biology. We'll talk about the differences between these interactions as we go. So the first one should be a fairly familiar one for some of you. That's competition. This is when organisms, whether they're the same species or not, use a resource in the same place at the same time. And this fits in with the definition of the word niche. Now, niche is an organism's role or its place in an ecosystem. And so if two organisms end up using the same resource at the same time, they kind of have overlapping niches, and this can lead to competition. Now, the majority of direct physical competition, is interesting to note, will usually be within the same species. It's kind of rare to see direct competition or a lot of direct competition across species lines. So things that organisms will compete for: food, water, mates. Of course, that's an in-species competition thing. Territory. And keep in mind that competition also applies to things like plants and funguses as well. Plants will actually compete for access to sunlight, especially plants in tropical jungles. You'll note that if a giant jungle tree falls over, it creates a lot of open space where there once was none, and so the plants down below towards the ground will suddenly have a lot of access to sunlight that the large canopy trees have actually outcompeted them for. And in terms of animals, it's also interesting to note that they'll also compete for any perceived future access to these items, especially with regards to mate competition. So like these rams over here, they're probably competing for a mate, but the mate may not necessarily be anywhere near there yet. They may be competing just for a basic hierarchy system. These foxes, again, I don't know if they're competing for a mate. They could be competing for territory. And of course, these guys over here on the right are probably competing for food. But again, competition is usually within the same species. It's very rare actually to see too much of it outside or cross species lines too much by comparison. Predation is another category. This is when organisms capture and feed on other organisms, of course costing the second organism its life. There's predators on land, of course, in the oceans and in the air. And we can even find cases of plant predators. Now, the next categories will fall under the general umbrella of symbiosis. People will usually say the word symbiosis when they're talking about the first case, mutualism, but there's two other types of symbiosis that come up that we have to make sure we're clear on. And symbiosis in general just means any relationship in which two species live closely together. And there are three main types of symbiosis. The first type of symbiosis is called mutualism, and you can see I have this little plus symbol up here because this is a case where both species benefit from the relationship. Both species gain something. For example, this bee here is gaining nectar or food, so it's getting the benefit of food from this flower, where the flower is getting a benefit of having its pollen spread, so it's benefiting through its reproductive system thanks to the bee. On the left we have a cleaner fish, that's this little guy here, and a larger fish that's being cleaned. The cleaner fish gets the food, that's its benefit, where the other fish gets the parasites removed from the inside of its mouth that it couldn't otherwise reach. Commensalism is another type of symbiosis. This is where one species benefits, hence the plus up here, and another species that's not harmed, but it's not helped. Examples of this include things like barnacles living on the outside of whales. These are barnacles here. They're actually alive. They like to live on large things like boats as well, and they won't hurt the whale, but they're not helping the whale, while the whale is providing them with a nice, safe, relatively secure spot to live. You can see the same kind of situation in plants. These orchids here living on top of this tree. Again, the tree is not harmed, but it's not helped in this situation. And then the same situation set up here for lichen. And then lastly, we have parasitism. This is where one species benefits and the other species is in fact harmed. the parasite typically lives on or inside what we would call the host organism and causes it some level of harm. Now, examples of this include heartworms, tapeworms, fleas, and ticks, and you can see the tick right here. It's getting food out of its host organism, whereas the host organism is probably losing things like blood, and it runs a higher risk of disease. Now, it's important to note that parasites typically don't purposely kill their hosts. That's actually not to their benefit. If a parasite kills its host, odds are the parasite's going to die as well. So there's a distinction we have to make between parasitism and predation. Like I said before, predation could be argued to be a fourth type of symbiosis, but in predation, the symbols I would probably end up using would be a benefit to the predator, assuming it catches the prey, and, of course, instead of just being harmed, the prey ends up actually being dead. So it's similar to parasitism, but it's not quite the same thing, because in parasitism, the parasite is not purposely harming the host, or not purposely, killing the host. The parasite can survive without the host dying. So that wraps up the general categories of life's interactions. Let me know if you have any questions in class, and I'll see you guys in the next video.